whiteboard that we could roll in here.
Oh, I don't know.
That would
Probably
be
do.
helpful. Okay.
You have an extra pen.
Mhm. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our ranking meeting for this year. Appreciate the department heads and various entities that are here and to help us work through this process. As you know, we did a very similar thing last year. We felt it was very collaborative and helpful. It helped all of the various department heads get a feel for where everyone else was at and work together as a group to prioritize where the spending would be. Given the current environment of this year, what we would like to do is go through these and prioritize them as a group to the best of our ability, at which point as a commission we will look at the rankings and our available funds and reserves and from a potential increase in revenue to determine to which level we want to fund or we feel would be appropriate. As you can see, hopefully you all have your list of items. It's several pages long and full of lots of needed and good things. So we will go ahead and dive in. I'm trying to decide if we want to just where to start. Looking at this list. Suggestions?
Well, I would
Suggestions
suggest
welcome.
we take off all of the assessor, survey, and treasurer, since I think the request was to review capital and general fund, right, Brian? And where those are assessing and collecting,
Well,
maybe we don't
I think
talk
we
about
could,
those, or we
we
can
could
do them
rank them
first.
all and then.
Well,
just
that's what I'm saying, we
pull
can do
them
them
off.
first, but they are separate.
Yeah.
That's a great
But-
suggestion.
But definitely, I would say, rank everything, because ultimately, even if we go out,
Right.
go over and assessing and collecting, then you have to tap into
Oh, we won't.
general funds, so.
There's not very many on that
But,
request.
I think the approach you were mentioning, Mr. Chairman, of just ranking everything, and then you'll peel it off to the appropriate funds would be the best way to approach it.
Okay.
And if I could suggest maybe that these be turned in within 24 hours after.
That would
this
work.
meeting.
That would work. Okay, we're gonna I'll try and direct this to some degree, and I'm looking through to find it. And maybe if we could have, to start us off with, let's do this. Can I have each department head, and you don't have to come to the mic if you don't want to, just tell us your what's that, Renee? Yeah, that's if people are, I guess you might have to come to the mic so people can hear. If you can just come up and tell us your number one from your department, and then we will kind of work down through from there. And if there's anything that you really feel like you could drop or lose.
Chris Paulson, County Assessor. I came up primarily because I'm first on the list. I figured that might be easier.
That works great.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Just a clarification though. The list that I have in front of me, I received a communication that said nothing was approved outside of what was submitted in the spreadsheet. It said nothing. But there were things in the spreadsheet that are not on this list. So I'm not clear as to were those adjustments in the spreadsheet made, because the communication I received was nothing was changed from the original submission.
There were some things that, from the original submissions, that did make it into the tentative budget.
How would I know that? Because the communication I got back was a one-page sheet and it said nothing changed. Yeah,
Well,
there's nothing that was on that spreadsheet that I requested that is on this list.
Well, it would be specific to department. I don't have your sheet right in front of me, but I know that as those were prepared and I signed off on them.
Would they have been attached to the email that was sent out?
There was an email that was sent out to each
Right,
department,
right.
and it would have had, for example, here's what you're given from your request, here's what's there, then anything else that wasn't there should appear on the spreadsheet.
And
And then what
and-
you're saying is that there were some items, or in your case, your sheet said nothing was put into the tentative budget?
Right, there was absolutely no changes is what it was communicated
Okay,
in
and so
that
then you
email.
would from there look to see those items you requested to be on this ranking sheet,
Which they are not.
and there are some that are not. So, let
In
me,
fact, none of the things that I put on the spreadsheet are represented on this
okay,
spreadsheet.
I'll confer quickly with Deneen and I'll check that.
So
out.
then what's on this spreadsheet?
The spreadsheet were the additional items that, outside of the original spreadsheet. So
Okay.
there were, as you're familiar with the process, there was a spreadsheet that was sent out. There was a column on there that allowed for adjustments within that spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet was not editable outside of the identified items. So everything that's on here was on a second request, which was additional items, not adjustments. And so that is what I'm looking at, the first three items
In other
here,
words,
and
we
then
don't
the
really have all the
promotions.
additional items.
Well,
I don't know.
we just looked at the sheet. Are you talking about additional operating items?
On the original spreadsheet, we had the lines, everything was in, and then I asked for adjustments within those lines. That's the question.
It's blank in the form. There was no request.
Because there's a line in the form that is anything that you made adjustments in your budget, there was the additional request. Again, each department did that. Then in addition to those additional operating requests, then there were items that we went ahead, each department had a chance to ask for. We were just pulling up the assessors, and on the line of additional operating expenses, there was no figure plugged in to that line. So
That was
it's
my
probably a
under-
miscommunication.
I don't even have a spreadsheet.
Okay, because that was, my understanding was this list contained the additional asks that we needed to rank.
Yeah.
Based on Deneen's explanation, I was supposed to put something in a total in the first line, which I did not, because
Okay.
in the spreadsheet itself, I was saving these in that spreadsheet that was submitted to us. And it looked like, and it was actually totaling the new adjustment in that spreadsheet. So that is why
So is
it's
your
not
total
here.
dollar amount fine to get those other things?
There was only a few $1,000s, if I remember right, from what I submitted, so,
So
yeah.
you would still need these in addition to what was in your original budget?
And I can't tell you what those numbers are until I go back and look at them, if that makes sense.
Is this symptomatic with everybody? Does everyone have the same concern?
Actually, as I'm looking at it, that Chris would be one of the few departments that had nothing in that line. Everyone else put.
Everyone else I'm kind of seeing the shaking of the head no, but this seems to be just with Chris.
You wanna,
Yeah, I
you wanna be
assumed where,
last?
I assumed where the spreadsheet was totaling and readjusting the subtotals.
Let's go
Just
ahead,
being
Chris, and
concerned,
let's see if
so-
you can identify that and come back at the end and tell us what you've got.
All right. Just to clarify, last year we did do the 290 outside of the general. Are we doing that again? There was some discussion at the beginning. Yes?
We should be.
We should be, yes.
I see kind of a bobblehead type. Yes,
Mr.
no,
Chairman?
maybe.
If I may, since I've talked to each one of you, one of the things that I explained would probably be most appropriate, because last year, we actually had a targeted amount that we knew could come out of the general fund, because the
Right.
commission then said, and so as a result, we were peeling off items that may potentially go into other funds, so that that number could go further down the list. At this point, because everything is up in the air and there's some flux, the suggestion that I made to the commission, and that we discussed, was that we just rank everything. Then as they go through and they have a better feel based upon what Commissioner Ivy said about where revenues are, what they want to do, they can move that. And as things are peeled off to the other funds in their review process, then we'll know where that general fund number is.
So we're not
It's-
working with a threshold this year. It's dynamic.
Right, at this point, there
Right,
is
at this
no-
point, it's just a ranking, because there would technically be some degree of thresholds, because we obviously couldn't exceed the 7.5 plus
Right.
whatever
That
we
was
have in
agreed to last
reserve.
year, right.
But that's kind of where we wanted your input on the rankings, because I think that number does fluctuate to some degree based on, as we go through our discussion and say, and when I say discussion, when we get feedback, part of why we're doing this now is it gives us a month to reach out to the public and say, if we're going to increase your taxes, here's exactly what it will be funding. Are you good with that?
No, that
We-
makes sense.
And we can get that public feedback to go, yeah, I really think these new victim coordinators have to be there, and I'm willing to spend this extra money to make sure they're there. And that was the first thing I saw on my sheet, so it's not something I'm necessarily endorsing. But that gives us that time period to go through and find that final number
All right,
in that conversation at large.
thank you.
So I'll go next because I'm second on the list.
Sounds good.
My list is prioritized, but there is a change.
Okay.
So on my list, row 28, additional operational funds. Those are the items, the conglomeration of changes.
Can I ask just real quick before you get into it? When you say it's ranked, I see attorney 1, then 10, 11, 12. You've gone back through, that actually matches. So those are in order. If I look from 19 to 36, that's the ranking order.
No, the next column over, the department rank is how I ranked them.
Okay,
I think they were just put into the list.
they were sorted, yeah.
Somehow they were sorted.
Oh, I see, okay,
Okay, that's,
okay.
Again, the row 28 is the operational funds that Chris just mentioned that he didn't have in his, that's my conglomeration of things that were not included in the tentative budget that we requested, just minor line item changes. So that would actually not be number 18 on my priority list, that would be number 2.
okay.
Okay.
Other than that, mine are ranked properly.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Brian, you want to take it away?
Okay, on ours, of course, I have 4 different divisions. There were no priorities from the clerk division, nor were there priorities from the tax administration, because the one item we had there was a copier, which it looks like we can get this year. But the items there in the audit division was just that additional funds for time-limited help to help with the purchasing function. And then in the elections, those items listed there are in the correct order. And I would, looking at my department as an aggregate, I would put election items 2 and 3 above auditor item 1, and then go down from there.
Okay.
But most importantly, on the promotions, it's just getting that solid infrastructure in place for our elections moving forward.
Okay.
Will you tell me again how you would order that then?
So the 2 promotions from elections, number 1,
Line 39 and 40.
Right.
line 39, line 40.
1 and 2.
Yeah. Then the additional funds to assist in helping with purchasing. And then number 4, the pole pad maintenance fee. And then 5 and 6, the opener and the extractor.
Okay, perfect. So that's just. Richard?
Well, we only have one item, so it's fairly easy to prioritize. But Bert and I have gone back through this, looked at it very closely. We can give back $393,804, which would make our supplemental request $547,577. And most of that is staff to increase the capacity in the UCAP program that matches what the sheriff's asking for, and some additional costs that go along with having personnel like phones and computers and basic stuff like that. And a couple of other minor
But there was
personnel
an
things.
opportunity to still get some of those funds, if I remember right. Through
Pardon me?
grant, there was an opportunity to still get even additional out of that from grants and stuff, potentially?
I
Or
don't
is that-
know. I don't know of any
okay.
specific grants that we could apply for
Okay.
right now. That doesn't mean it's not possible.
That's the
I'm just-
general fund request.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, Kim?
Okay, mine's pretty easy. They're pretty well ranked in order, with operational funds being first. And I might just add that the last two items, postage and printing errors, are restricted, or just in case postage were to go up, or that we had an error at the printer or something, so pretty simple and straightforward.
Okay.
Last two restricted.
Yeah, the last two. Any questions?
That's simple.
Okay.
Okay.
Neil asked me to come up and talk about the GIS requests.
Mhm.
For us, 90% of our work is really supporting other departments, providing mapping and analysis support. So the most important thing for us is buying additional ArcGIS licenses so that we can get the software on more desks and more departments. So while this software isn't directly affecting my guys or my desk, it is allowing us to extend our services to other departments. So that would be the most important thing. The rest of ours are fairly small items, as you can see, and they're pretty much ranked in order.
Okay.
If I remember right, the furniture was to redo how you guys are currently set up down there,
Yeah, they wanted more. We have high,
but it's not a staff change.
it's not staff change.
Okay.
It's just to get half walls
Yeah.
instead of full walls so that they can have a little bit more discussion amongst themselves.
Sure.
Thanks.
Perfect, thank you. I was gonna say Ralph, but it looks like he's
He's gone until
know.
Wednesday.
substitute. A good time. All right.
All right, so for the health department, you'll notice that we have prioritized by our departments, our divisions within the departments. So
Okay.
it doesn't go from environmental health all the way down to the bottom. Each division has their rankings, if that makes sense.
It does.
So for us, if reprioritizing, we would put the promotions in each of those categories, ensuring that those employees that have met the requirements and are qualified and so, for example, line 160 would be the #1 ranking in the environmental health category. Then beneath that, it would go to our operational funds, and we could make that same change for each of the categories for health promotion, admin, mosquito abatement, and so forth,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
So in each of your departments, the top priority is the promotion.
Promotions, and then operational funds.
There's no
needed.
promotions in nursing?
No well, actually, let me see. Yes, thank you.
Why is it NR?
I don't know why that has.
What's
nurse,
NR?
Well, these are new staff requests, so, nurse 10, nurse 11, I assume that's the position that it was in, on our additional staffing request form. I'm assuming that's why that's labeled that way, but nurse, NR and nurse, they all belong together. Some of these are already, for example, new nurses, the school health nurses, that's already in the works. And so it's hard for this to even be considered on this list, because we've been in agreement with the local health districts to pay half of those costs. And so that's a little bit cumbersome for that to even be on this list, but
Because it wouldn't start till next school year, right?
uh,
Till like July,
right, yeah.
so they could be addressed in the summer. Or in May, basically.
I think some of these actually do hit mid-year. I think we have some nurse coordinator positions. I'll have to look. I brought my massive
Yeah,
binder
mid-year
with me,
for
so-
county, but fiscal year for those guys.
Yeah, so, but I hope that makes sense. We have, there's also we had 2 duplicate asks, so we can eliminate the very last item, which is video equipment. We also have that ask in the administrative section, so that line can be eliminated. $780 for video equipment. We had a duplicate ask of, in line 150 for video equipment in the admin section, help admin, that's line 150. Keep line 150 and then remove the. Yeah, we would keep that, yeah. That would be, if there isn't a promotion, then that would be our number one ask, so operating funds.
As an overall department, considering all of your subsections, is there one thing in there you just can't live without? If you were to come up with something that's just, you know, this really makes us function.
That is super difficult. Let me, I think of our department categorically. It's really hard to,
Right,
to prioritize.
and I
one or the-
recognize that might be
Yeah,
beyond
but
that. Again, this is,
our question,
we're
though,
trying
has
to
be
eat an
right.
elephant
Yeah,
today, so
right.
I think that would help us take one bite if there was something.
Yeah, if you tell us there's something not important, it's gonna get cut.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, I got
But if there's
gotcha.
something in there that you're like, boy, the health department as a whole can't live or function without this, it'd be great to know.
I guess the question is what the additional operational funds versus new staff? That's the hard part for me, because we've changed this budget process now back to spreadsheets that we never had when I first started, or that I remember. And so I don't know what all of those contain. That's the hard part for me, because some of these are $500,000.
Sure.
And it's probably vital, but I don't know what they are, but I know how vital a school nurse is, right? That's the hard thing for me on these, so,
Sure.
you know, I understand the promotions of individuals and, like, we deal with that, but I guess I don't know, Brian, what's in these additional operational funds, what are they?
Essentially, each department then went through line by line and made adjustments within the amount that they were given, which originally is based upon 2017's actual expenses plus an increase in 2018's internal service funds and personnel costs. We can get you that specific information so you can look at it.
So when we went through the original budget to set the tentative,
Yeah.
I guess my question is we had those line items, we had the spreadsheet that broke down and said each of the years, right?
Right.
And it said like postage 1,200, they said $1,800 is what they needed. That totals what's contained in the additional operational expense, and then on top of that are the additional asks that were on that next spreadsheet? Is that how this breaks down?
Essentially, some of those operational things were granted in the tentative budget, and so they were subtracted. They initially, in submitting for preparation of the tentative budget, gave, for example, $20,000. If it looked like $5,000 of that was legitimate because of trend in postage or whatever, then that left $15,000.
Okay.
And that's the figure
Yeah, I
that
would
would
like
be.
that breakdown, just because I did make some personal judgments on how I'm gonna vote on some of those additional operational
Yeah.
funds. So if I could get those breakdowns.
Yeah, and we can get that information to all three of you.
Because some of those I didn't find very valid, and that way it'll help me reduce. So maybe in the health department, rather than $500,000, maybe it's 420 for me.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, thank you.
What we absolutely have to have, I guess, are our school health nursing positions. If I were to make an overall, and then some of these are also grant funded, which is also, we have the new intergenerational poverty grant.
Right.
And so for that to be on this list is a little quirky. The 61,000, the 169,000. With that not getting accepted, we wouldn't then be able to satisfy the work for that grant. And then also we recently just a few weeks ago got funding for an opioid crisis time limited employee, and that's a new grant too. That's paid for with grant funds. And so that's another quandary for me, is to try to ferret that out. But so our top request would then be for definitely the grant-funded positions, and then our nursing positions as well. So I don't know if that helps or just muddied the water, so.
For me, that helps.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Ralph Barnes, HR. Okay, they're all super important. And starting with the additional operating funds, that's comprised of the COBRA fee, the COBRA administration fee, and that we share with our broker Gallagher, and it also includes time-limited wages. The time-limited, the plan for that is to help us inherited a pretty significant filing backlog, scanning and filing backlog, trying to get that caught up in 2019 so that we're at zero as far as having employee files for terminated employees that have been processed properly. So that's the intent of that. The remodel is for adding an office space in the HR department. We're short one office space for the staff, and so we're trying to make that work as best we can right now. The promotion is for the benefits analyst or specialist who's hired in as a specialist. We had recruited for the analyst, but he was just short on the time required, on the requisite time. So early next year he'll satisfy the requirement to move to the analyst level. And the other thing that's not actually in here that was the request for an additional $9,600 for the Perks Now program that we were looking at implementing in 2019. So I'm not sure if this is the time to talk about that or not.
Yeah, throw that out there.
And so that, as we had reviewed in the past, this is a discount program that is competitive with other local discount programs. It's primarily focused on the local area, Utah, and it also has the ability for us to modify the website and the mobile app to include our wellness program and also employee association events. So it does have a lot of customizable tools for that. The cost is $800 a month for all employees. The plan was to have this to be funded as one of our benefits, and so essentially you're looking at approximately $1 a month for each employee to have this added. And as far as what absolutely has to be there, the the COBRA fee, that's one of the must-haves. And as far as if I had to choose between the remodel and the promotion, I'd probably go with the promotion, because that is it's something that we need to do to make that proper as far as the compensation for that employee. But the remodel is very important as well because we're short on space. So any questions? $9,600 annually. It's $800 each month.
One question, Ralph, I'd have, because it affects our overall budget and where we move. What numbers are we seeing coming back as far as adjustments to living expenses in the county? What's Social Security doing? What's the state doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Social Security just announced a 2.8% COLA for 2019. Social Security is as much as 1% lower than the actual CPI. CPI for the West right now is running at about 3.6%. And what's really challenging is wages in Utah County year to date in 2019 are as high as 9.7% up year over year. So to stay competitive in the marketplace, it's rough because of how hot the market is and how low the rate of unemployment is, which is about 3%. So we're looking at significant cost increases year over year in the economy, and also significant pressures on wages because of what's happening in Utah County. And I realize a lot of the wage increases is driven by the tech sector, but it also has the effect of affecting all the roles in those industries that are support roles, which has an overall, strengthening in the market for all jobs. So we're seeing all wages in Utah County going up.
So can I ask you a question on that? When it comes to wage raises, obviously, rising wages, obviously that's a good thing. When everybody says, oh, the market's gonna dip, cyclical, it's going to do that. When markets dip, do wages drop? Or is it just generally slowing from hiring and unemployment starts to rise a little more to a healthy level? Because right now it's actually an unhealthy market.
Right, I would agree with that. Typically they don't, drop. What happens is, the increases stop.
Okay.
And if inflation, continues on, you see, real wages go down. In other words, the buying, power of wages continue to reduce over time, unfortunately. And just to maintain, purchasing power, we need to, stay up with inflation. But you bring up a really good, point for next year. When will the economy slow down and when will it, drop off, which I agree will happen. However, wages won't drop necessarily. They usually don't, but they stop increasing, and there tends to be a movement, towards, reductions in staff is usually what happens, as opposed to wages going down. It's very unusual for wages to drop. That's extremely unusual.
Okay, so how do we weigh the difference? So as a commission, for example, the one thing we've dealt with is recently had 2 cities leave unified. Okay, I'm speaking specifically to law enforcement. There's obviously still wage increase, but how do we weigh the difference in wage increase and crazy cities paying way above market, or at least what we get told is market? How are we supposed to weigh that? Because it's going to impact our budget, because if we need to increase the sheriff's department 10%. So in other words, how do we know if that's an aberration versus standard now?
I think we need to treat that as a one-off, and the fact that those, cities are smaller and they only have so much impact on the overall economy. I would be hesitant to make an increase because of a new, police department that's hiring, aggressively, but it's a smaller, police department. We may lose a few heads, but we need to stay, competitive in the overall market, not necessarily look at those one-off cases.
Okay.
I mean, that's something that needs to be looked at, but it's not necessarily going to, drive the overall, wage, strategy, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
So on your CPI, your analysis, is it micro or macro? Are you going with the Western United States, or are you pulling it right down to Utah or Utah County? How are you getting that analysis?
It's a little harder to get, Utah County, because the CPI doesn't go to that level. It's Western States, which is 3.6 for the last, 2 months, 3.4 for this current month.
The average, though?
But, 3.56 is the average right now on the CPI for the Western States. Now, what's more challenging in Utah, again, is getting it down to the level of what's happening in Utah County. 3.7 is, the predicted wage increase by Department of Workforce Services for the state. What's happening in Utah County is a little unusual because of
We're higher.
Right. The pressure on wages is significant, and they're looking at 6.5. DWS is looking at 6.5 for non-agricultural wages, just for Utah. And so, and again, like I mentioned before, it's as high as 9.7 just for Utah County for wage increase. Now, that's not, CPI, that's wages. So, there is, I am actually waiting for a report from, DWS, economists that should come out next week. That'll give us more of an idea of what we're looking at for the county, for, the CPI, or what they would use for the CPI for the county.
Well, we know CPI's gone up because.
It has.
Well, when you say 9.7% wages, and you go down and you drive down Orem Center Street, and Orem Target's hiring, and the mall's hiring, and everybody's got openings, and your fast food places all have openings like crazy, and they're still starting at $11 an hour.
Right.
Obviously, to cover those costs. As we all remember, 4 years ago, there was a larger 99-cent menu, and now it's the $1.99 menu, and most of those things are disappearing off those. So, I mean, it is high.
It is high. And you could make, the case that, the 3.4 is, CPI for the West is low for Utah.
Does that include LA?
It
And are you
includes-
measuring that on relative size?
Let me get back to you on that. It's state level. it's at the state level. I need to get back to you on which exactly areas are included in that, in the CPI West. I know Utah's included, but let me get back to you on that.
And I'm assuming it's non-seasonal, because you're
It
gonna
is
do an average.
non-seasonal, yeah. We usually look at the last, average of the last, 3 months is what we look at, which again, for the Western is, 3.56, and it's, continued, to trend up since last year. Again, the economists at, DWS is expecting a similar, trend for 2019. I do agree that there'll be some slowing, perhaps in that rate of increase. I would think it needs to, but, it is an unusual market, for labor especially right now.
Yeah, as weird as it is, we need about a 5% unemployment to be healthy.
We really do need unemployment to go up for us to attract, more, applicants. I mean, that's not something you want to say, but it's the fact. If unemployment was higher, we would attract a lot more candidates. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy Davies for the Justice Court. Ours is just ranked as they're listed 1, 2, and 3. The travel is mandatory, so that is what we.
Mandatory by.
It is mandatory training by the state for the clerks and the judges.
So what if we don't fund it?
I don't know.
And I'm so sick and tired. This is not against you guys.
Uh-huh.
I'm so sick and tired of the state telling me I have to do something when that AOC was such an awesome guy to work with over the last few years for the new court. So again, what if we don't fund it? What are they gonna do?
Yeah.
Kathy, I think the risk is loss of certification.
Oh, you mean like after they passed the budget last year and then pull $200,000 away anyway?
Or loss of access to the software programs that they are required to use.
Yeah.
Okay, so what if we shut down the court because we are in a fight with them?
Well, like we discussed last year, that is an option, but you will have to continue to pay the judge's wages.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And you'll have to contract for someone else to handle the cases.
Yeah, again, it's not because I'm a no, I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
I don't see anybody from Public Defender, so I'm gonna jump up.
He's already come. It's a big, big ask.
Ours is similar to like what the health department has. It's several different divisions. Ours has various funding sources as well. The rankings that are in that third column by the different divisions are accurate as we look through those. One that, with one exception, that'd be line 208. It's on page 3 of 5, about 2/3 of the way down.
Fundamentally, Richard, can I ask you just a question? Because you're not the only one. I should have asked this earlier when the health department was up here, but I walked out real quick. The public, since we're going through tax cuts or tax increase potentially, right? We'll always say, you need to cut, you need to cut, you need to cut. So I see $500, $500. I know what those are for. Those are good classes. We need them. But the question is where we turn back money, what if the commission just says no to all these small ones? Because it seems like we can always absorb that. And I think that's what the public's saying is, trim the fat. We've trimmed the fat, but at the same time.
And we approached it a little different. You see ours broken down where others say, additional operational expenses.
Right.
We've given it to you in more detail.
Right, and I appreciate that, and that's my point is, how much of that?
Honestly, a lot of the small ones we can absorb them somewhere.
Sure.
Is there a need there? Yes, there is, but we'll do with what we need to do.
And I appreciate it that way.
Line 208 is the Sheep Creek match under the roads, 248,500. That is the project with the Forest Service on the Sheep Creek, Indian Creek Road. It's about a $13 million project that the Forest Service is funding the majority of that.
That's a general fund?
Well, it's additional, and we don't have it in the B Road money to do it. So that is one that we have signed an agreement with the Forest Service in Wasatch County on. It's shown there as 14th on our road. And I'm assuming that because there's not one through whatever, that some of those have already been funded in the tentative budget. That one is one that, because of the contract we already have in place, that probably needs to be our top one on the roads.
Something that just popped in my head, and I don't even know if this is legal for these funds. You have River Park, Spanish Fork River Park, Willow Park, and Provo Canyon Trail removal.
Tree removal.
Tree removal on the trails.
Willow Park and Spanish Fork River, it's in the park itself.
Okay, not the trail. Okay.
On Provo Canyon.
So
it is
Provo
along
Canyon
the
tree
trail.
removal, then, here's my question. When we go to MAG, the funding that they've tried to pay and give the, as this commission has made famous, the free fare zone comes out of a different pot of money that they said can only be used in certain ways. Those ways, trails and stuff like that. Why can't the maintenance of trails, or can maintenance of trails?
I don't believe the maintenance is an eligible expense.
Okay.
I'd have to check on that to tell you for sure, but my understanding is it's been more like a capital expense, a project related, not a.
Because I'd much rather see us
side.
start maintaining
I
a
can-
$17 million Murdoch Canal Trail or all these other trails out of that than giving
I can
free
check on
fare
that
for a
to-
free bus that costs.
The one
Couple
thing on that is
dollars.
if it's the CMAQ money, I would be cautious against using CMAQ money, even if that is eligible for maintenance money, because then you would federalize your maintenance process. And I don't think we want
Yeah.
to go down that
Okay.
road, so. It
Yeah,
just- it would
that
add
was
a
just
whole bunch of,
Food for thought.
yeah. And I can check on that and see if those are available for
And
maintenance.
that tree
but I don't
removal,
know.
where's my fire people? No, not that one. The
So Richard, on the 208, we have an agreement with that. What account did we agree to that was coming out of? Is that this account here?
Yes, yep. I believe it is. Any other questions for me?
Outside of the 208, what's your number one?
I would probably say, line 227, it's the top one in community development. It's a career ladder promotion for one of our planners. It's one that I think that we are at risk of potentially losing him to another entity if we don't move that up. And then probably second to that would be in, let's see, it'd be line 220 in fire marshal for the uniform allowance. We have had some discussion with the commission on uniform allowances in general and where that comes into play department-wide. The fire marshal is a little bit unique there because of the specialized uniforms or PPE type equipment that they have, so.
I would like to say publicly, because this will be used for tax increase, you're the one department that has had horrible luck in keeping people when it comes to wages. Everybody else, at some point, we've been able to do it. So, what I'm saying
we
is,
compete
your
oftentimes with-
promotions should probably be, they are for me, your number one. You've lost too many good people that this county is hurting now.
And we do compete oftentimes with development and construction that's that 9% that,
Yeah.
you know, I think Ralph was saying that was the tech sector, but, you know, the construction side of the world right now is booming,
Yeah,
and that's who we often compete with, so,
yeah, so.
thanks.
Thanks, Richard.
Jeff Smith, recorder. Ours are pretty much good the way they are. We do need the additional funds. That would help a lot. The promotion is a career ladder adjustment, and Simplify is a contract that we need to make sure that we have enough to fulfill. With records management, these are all just contracts that they need to have the money for, so.
Perfect. Any other questions on that?
My list looks kind of big.
It's just pages and pages. It's
Yeah.
not that bad, right?
I don't think, ours definitely isn't in order of our priorities. Our number one priority this is obviously the district court issue, funding the staffing plan and the equipment to get district court rolling.
And that would be, for clarification, that would be lines 62 through like, how far down does that one go?
Well, it goes clearing,
I know it's like 1.5 million.
yeah, it's like
total,
1.5,
but-
1.6,
But
something
it
like
would,
that.
it would encompass items 62 through.
62, 79, 80, 81. I'm trying to find the transportation van for the juveniles, since we're gonna have to transport them.
It's 83.
83. So one thing that you can do on that list is you can cross off 63 through 72. We've scrubbed some budgets this year, and we've purchased all those items from monies from this year
Okay, so 63
through
to
72.
72 can go away.
And we're
So there's
trying.
a total of 4,000.
What's that?
Nothing.
Oh, there's like 5, 6 in there. That's great. But I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that lumps, that those items kind of went together. as
Right, yeah,
funding
they're all
the
lumped
court.
together.
So it's almost, although they're broken out, we almost kind of have to treat that as
Yeah,
one request to get the courthouse functional.
right.
What else you got?
Uh,
Outside of that one, where else can you not live without?
The overtime in the jail, I just don't see how we're gonna be able to function down there without some additional overtime. We're down 22, soon to be 23 this week or next.
But you have 2 pods closed.
Two are closed now. We can't close anything else down.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I wasn't saying that because, I was only
Right.
saying that so that everybody understood. You're still at overtime, even down staff, but we have closed 2 pods.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 2 pods are closed, and one of those was, I believe, the ice, maybe both of them.
So I know this isn't your priority, but I'm going to state publicly, again, these jet skis and trailers, is something that I hounded the sheriff's department, worked very closely with for a couple of years. And every year the first year I got mad, I'm like, why, the second year I should say, why do we keep putting this on? There are 8, 10, 12 of these that are used for search and rescue, and all of these that are all old. And this is, again, you'll see these for the next few years because they do need to be rotated. I mean, some of these, you'd be embarrassed if we had to come out and
Right.
try and save your life on some of these. So I know they're not your number one priority, but
We figured.
this is
maybe-
something that's very necessary
Yes, it is.
for the county, so.
It is. And I think that she gave you a copy of our prioritized
Yes.
list, which is a little different than the main one, so.
Yeah.
The medical funding for Wasatch Mental, that's kind of another one that's just, we don't have a lot of choice in that one. That's not a want, that's a must.
Right.
You have a number on that one?
On your list, I'm not sure which line item that is.
It could be contained in 114, medical operationals on that list.
Yeah, it might be.
And that's the 115,350?
Yeah, 115. Yeah, I think it is
Yeah, that matches.
on line 114.
Okay.
So those are our, I mean, the district court is number one. We have to do that. I don't,
Right.
it's not like, that's not a want, that's a must. So.
I guess the only question on that is, and again, with a chief deputy, what if we don't put a chief deputy over the judicial?
Are we gonna fail? No, we won't fail, but,
The question
Right
is
now,
what purpose do they serve? Like, I understand what they do. In my mind, and again, I know this isn't the way it is, but in my mind, there's one courtroom, you know what I mean? And it's
Well-
hard to say there's enough work. I can't get my head wrapped around that.
so right now, our chief deputy, he's over fire, he's over judicial, and he's over all of enforcement, which includes detectives, patrol, evidence, everything.
Okay.
So his span of control is so stretched out. He's over 1, 2, 4, 5 different
Right.
lieutenants. The judicial division is just growing so fast, and with this new district court, it's literally 3 times bigger than the one we have now.
Right.
And the way that the judges want it ran, it's gonna be very man-intensive, the way they want it.
Was there also a way to give the new chief deputy and potentially like evidence and a couple of those other things?
Yes.
That was part of.
Yes, so what, yeah, we could give the new chief deputy, the judicial, and obviously that would take probably all of their time, because judicial is a big outfit now, especially with this new court. And maybe we could, break off a couple of other things that they could work on.
That would be my
So-
request, is to look at that too.
Yeah.
Additional, that way we're not, I mean, we're still stretched, don't
We
get me
are,
wrong.
but we could survive with that, for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Doesn't sound like it. You're almost as demanding as the sheriff's office here.
I figured with the sheriff's office and that list, I'd be able to take a nap. With my $100 million in requests, I've got 3 items there. You can probably rank them from top to bottom.
They're in their correct order for you then?
What's that?
That's the order that you would place them in.
Yeah.
You need steel cabinets more than you need Trimble software.
You know what? These are all critical components of what I'm doing.
That's why I
so-
say that, because you need that software update.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can always stack those plats. We can come to the commission office and stack the plats on your desktops.
I think you should.
That's fine.
I won't be here, so I don't care.
No, the item number 1, additional operational costs. We pretty much zero out our budget every year. I don't know if you've, we turn very little money back, so.
But you also don't ask for much every year.
That's right. We don't ask for a lot, so. Any questions?
No, thanks.
Okay, did we get our assessor, Chris, you get lined out?
I did find it. It's not that significant. It's $6,970.
For additional.
All the adjustments that remain in the spreadsheet.
So 6,000, can you give me that?
$970.
So that would be in addition to those other 4 items.
Right. Yeah.
Additional operational.
What's your number 1, Chris? And like, are these in order after that?
Well, the one we have, department ranking number 1's Apex Software. We actually have it in this year's budget, and we never moved forward with the project because there's other things pending before we got to
Carry over.
So with that, we're actually going out to talk to a users group on number 3. Those 2 items actually work together.
Building layer.
Yeah.
Okay.
If this works, we can actually reduce our staff by 1. If it doesn't work, then it'll just be something that gets rolled over. But we've looked at it. We've looked at demos. Demos look great, but we're going to a users conference to make sure the users are. It actually does what it says, because we've learned that one of these companies will tell you it works great, and then you find out it doesn't really work the way they intended it or said it would. So they've invited us out to the users conference to verify that it's going to work.
You have no ranking on your promotions. I'm sure
I
that was an
know.
error.
Yeah, that was something we talked about. Yeah, it really should be number 1 because it all has to do with commercial primarily. Our commercial division has more staffing layers of people who don't have commercial in their job title than do. And this is something that Ralph and I are currently working on, so. So promotions is probably number 1. And as I said, the other 3 items have the potential of eliminating positions if they work out of efficiency.
So even the push pin software?
Right.
It's all.
That that is a component of the overall scheme, but it doesn't work with Apex and the building layer review application.
So Brian, how do we handle, so if these are all in this year's budget, normally we carry it over.
Well, only number one is,
Oh,
the other two are not.
For the 65,000?
The 65 is in this year's budget
Okay.
that we did not use.
so I guess the question I have, when reducing the staffing plan, what's the potential savings on that? Is that a wash on that 70? Is there still
You're
a
looking at
savings
an
that goes back in?
appraisal position that's probably may come in around 60 grand plus benefits and everything else. So
Okay.
it could be a wash, yeah.
Okay.
At this point in time, I can't tell you that's what's gonna happen, because in 2 weeks I'll know more about this than I do right now.
Good, that's before we vote.
Yeah.
On this, is that-
Yeah, put the promotions as one. Yeah, because if you do two, you have to do number three. I mean, if you do line 280, you also have to do 282, because they work together.
right.
That would be number two.
280 is not really a request.
Well, it's in this year's budget.
That's what I mean.
Are we gonna roll it over or not? That's the big question. And it is, 65 doesn't cover everything we're doing. 65 is half of what the project will be. So we are anticipating doing half the project 1 year, half the next, and then doing it every other year that way.
Okay,
So, if that helps.
makes sense. Okay, I think that's everyone, right?
No, the health department wanted to come back up.
It's okay. I was actually gonna give you all one last shot.
That's exactly why I'm up here. I was nervous that was one and done, so.
No,
Didn't really go through and have a chance to explain some of these. The labels kind of don't fully describe what the ask is, but definitely I should have mentioned earlier that Ralph would have been here explaining our department, but he had scheduled vacation well in advance of this, had already purchased airline tickets and so forth before this meeting was set. On item 155, with environmental health, monitors, that's not computer monitors, that's actually a
The new
centralized.
law change.
Yeah, it's a centralized database system that it's an interlocal agreement. The Salt Lake Valley Health Department already paid for the development of this through Weber State. So what this is paying for ongoing maintenance, and what it is enabling the department to share information with all counties with our IM program to prevent fraud. And it's so it's a multi-jurisdictional compliance list. And I'm trying to see if there's any other important information about that one. So that's a key ask from our air quality division, is that it's a monitoring program, not a computer monitor.
not a computer monitor. That's good to know.
And it's just paying for ongoing maintenance to join that for the main counties that are part of the Wasatch Front. That's what that one is for. The environmental health scientist ask, that new position, the EH scientist one, that would be specifically for our food program. Enormous growth with restaurants and inspection, and they are tasked quite a bit trying to stay on top of what they can do with the inspectors that perform those. Already talked about the promotions. The software, that would be also for maintaining and updating air quality program software programs within air quality. The thermometers and shoes, sounds very odd, but we have inspectors that go into wet conditions and this just destroys their shoes, their own personal shoes. And so these would be like rubberized boots or shoes that are waterproof to enable them to be able to make those inspections without having that. And then the thermometers, they've been using thermometers for inspections that don't hold up. They'll put those thermometers in dishwashers to make sure that they're maintaining the sanitizing heat that's necessary, and the thermometers just haven't been holding up. And so they found a product that has been shown to hold up for the repeated inspection that they use to measure the heat of sanitizing fluid and waters in the dishwashers at the various restaurants that they inspect. And then you'll notice ongoing training that's needed for the inspectors for pool and so forth. We have started to do in-house videography. I don't know if some of you have seen some of the videos that we've recently done. A whole lot. It's less expensive for us to do it ourselves now and build in-house expertise and have that equipment so that we can provide public education videos as well as recruitment videos for our programs and services, and also for training. We can actually do video training as well. So that's what the $1,500 ask is. The training funds on item 153, that's a part of the ASPR grant. We work with a coalition with our hospital systems. ASPR is what that stands for. Earlier, the first meeting we had, we were talking about the utility heater needed for mosquito abatement in their shed. I believe it was, I can't remember if Commissioner Graves made the point that maybe that,
capital.
yeah, maybe that should be paid for by the Public Works Building Maintenance Fund.
I believe it should.
So
Which number is that?
that is item 122. That they have a shed where they store their chemicals and other equipment.
It's adding a, like a furnace, a heating component for the winter. Yeah. Yes.
So that can be eliminated then off this list right there. And then the additional operating funds in mosquito abatement, item 121, the vast majority of that is in restricted funds. That's for 73,000 roughly is insecticide chemicals. An additional 16,000 or 15,500 would be for the air spray that they do around the lake in areas where the ULD sprayers can't reach. And then 16,000 is for the part-time staffing needed to go out and do what they need to do. The bike crew as well as those that run the ULVs and so forth, and that check the traps and the monitors during the busy summer season, our part-time limited staff.
I have a question on those numbers particularly. So we just came through a dry year. There's not really a necessary prediction for what next year will be. Is this number based on a historical pattern, or is it based on a prediction of weather patterns in the future, which would determine the mosquito population?
It's averaging out year after year. We had a fairly dry year this year, and still came close to the full need. And the insecticide costs are increasing too, and so this is Danny Miller's best prediction as to what. And if there's a super dry year, and we don't have standing water and issues like that, if the restricted funds aren't needed, he wouldn't ask for that. This year, I think we came in right at what the ask was. So, and already talked about the grant positions, the opioid and IGP, and the school nursing. The line 174, the EPI area is, we had 2 additional staff that were, other counties have more. I mean, Salt Lake has over a dozen epidemiologists, and we only had 2 or 3. And recently we were able to add 1 epidemiology nurse that was covered through existing funds that we had, and so right now they're at the point where they need to remodel that area to make it work well for those staff that's what that 5,500 is for. And the remaining items in nursing are for training for the nurses that work in various areas. Some work in cancer, some work, the USNA, that stands for the Utah School Nursing Association. PAT stands for Parents as Teachers. They're the home visitation nurses that go out and help the high-risk families. And that's a training that they need to maintain their certification. And scanner replacements, this is there if we need to replace those scanners. And so this year we didn't have a need to replace. We purchased new scanners for the Payson office. But if scanners aren't needed, then that 1,800 wouldn't be needed.
So- I guess the real question is, when a scanner's needed, what's the turnaround time on when you need it?
So we could probably get one fairly quickly, probably a month or so. And so
That you can live without it for a month. So the reasoning is
Yeah.
because with the current way we're budgeting, if it's something that may or may not be needed, we'd prefer not to need it, and then, or put it in the budget, and then when it's needed, open up the budget, address those things, because it's funny when a scanner is needed, that it's funny how 3 or 4 other things are needed. We've never had to open the budget for $1,000.
Right.
It's always multiple requests. And so that's the real question is there a way on some of those things, seeing that, and that's the thing we're
We'd
trying to look
probably
at.
just absorb that then.
Okay.
Yeah, so, go ahead and cross 182 off then. Phones is for new staff out at the Payson office. We're trying to take care of that in this year's budget, and if we do, then that too, we can eliminate that, that phone. Furniture, actually, this is for chairs within the nursing office. And they're starting to wear out, break,
Not
pinch.
starting.
You've seen them,
They're
right?
bad.
They're bad. And so, for ergonomics and that was a major ask of our nursing division. And toner, lots of printers. As to why it's $2,000, I would have to go and look at my detail, but obviously need that for ongoing printing needs. Nurse Directors Conference, that used to be a nurse practitioner. Our prior director was a nurse practitioner. Our new nurse has her master's in nursing, and so it's just simply a different conference that she would be attending, and that would be for our division director of nursing. And then the injury mini grant local training, that's grant funding that's utilized for injury prevention training locally. And I believe, have we gotten through everything? Yes, that's it, so.
Okay, so question, because I know when we did the salary increase this few months ago, the health department, we had to front them out of the general fund, but in essence, we get reimbursed. Is that the same with your promotions and things? So as we increase the staff, when the next budget year comes through from the state or the feds, does that get absorbed? Is that always the case? So the salaries for those people, when they go up, whether it's through a step increase or anything, do those always get absorbed?
Many of our grants are very static. They don't increase from year to year. Sometimes they do. We just found out that we'll be getting an increase in EPIC funding of a very, very large amount, which would help with the chronic disease prevention staff and definitely absorbing that. But others are staying exactly the same.
So it's a general fund hit when we raise?
In some cases, yes, and in others not.
Okay.
It just depends on the year. We don't know and can't predict. We renegotiate our contracts in July with the state health department for those grants, and a lot of times the grants are static and stay almost exactly the same from year to year, and so it does impact the general fund in those cases. But we've had a few increases that we just found out about within the past 2 weeks. And that's a difficulty. This process kind of doesn't coincide perfectly, and grant changes can happen throughout the year.
You and
so-
Richard Nance, it's the same for you guys?
And the CJC, lots of grant oriented programs. But then we have other departments that are like environmental health that have very few grants. So we're kind of a mixed bag over at the health department. So anyway, I hope that helps with some of the clarification as to what these are.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna be nice for a minute. Any other last pitches you gotta make? You feeling comfortable with what you said? I would like to get, kind of a general feel. I know for me, from my perspective, there's a couple items on here that I see as top priorities, and it's primarily because they're mandatory, and the number one thing I actually see is with the new courthouse. It's very expensive, but it's state mandated, we have to have the people there. And so I think, you know, as we look at this list, for me, that's kind of how I start to break these down is, well, what can we live without? What's being forced upon us? Outside of the courthouse, from your perspective, is there anything else that is on your list that is something we've inherited? I see the courthouse as something we inherit. As congratulations, you get this nice new shiny building. Now find, you know, a couple $1 million to staff it. Is there anything else on your list that would fall into that same type of category?
So, since Tom Means is not here, because I'm sure he's working and I'm his portfolio guy, he would tell you that we have inherited that $1 million in I don't want to call them death cases. I can't remember. Capital, thank you, capital cases. So where the death penalty or something potentially is on the table. Well, in extraordinary expenses, 800,000 and then
100,000.
353,000 in the other. So, anyway, I don't want to speak for him, but there's a reason the courts are busy. There's a reason the attorneys are busy on both sides, and the state does force us. We're one of 2 states in the nation that have to pay for public defenders, so it's a cool $1 million.
Jeff, you have?
There's a few on here.
I know.
If I'm looking at them, we've already signed agreements with, 208 seems to be one that we've already signed that agreement also.
Right.
We've got number 6 in HR, in which we have commitments in those, and then with the school nurses as well. I mean, they're ones that we have agreed to.
Is everyone following that? Okay, just making sure.
Just looking at the ones that, those are the ones that stood out right there.
I would also ask people, and I would say this, and if this doesn't work for your department, I'd like to know, because this is what I heard today, is promotions are number one, taking care of people. Don't disagree. It's the employees of Utah County that really provide the service and the service level we have in 95% of what we do. Some of it's software, I get. With the COLA, that's, if it's 3.7, whatever, just so you know, that's roughly 1.9, almost $2 million. That limits a lot of extra budget, because if we're going to take care of the people and do it the right way with the ever-increasing cost, I just would like you all to keep that in mind. And so when you're going through and we're saying, hey, can you absorb or maybe not have this, or can you do that? I didn't hear anybody say promotions wasn't their number one, taking care of their people. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So if I'm wrong in that, let me know.
One thing I just may add, I know in some situations, the promotions are actually because of increased job responsibilities. If it's an existing position and the COLA is good and it does things that way, and that is very beneficial to retain employees. But in areas where the departments need additional expertise or have to retain people, and that, such as in elections with the ever-changing, we've got a situation where a lot of institutional knowledge is going out the door. We need to somewhat maintain the continuity, and that's why the 2 in elections are so important, because that's carryover. So some of that, yes, COLA can address, but also I think myself and some of the other departments would just ask that you double check that some of those promotions, if they're because of the expanded job responsibilities.
Right, and I'm not saying to eliminate promotions. What I'm saying is, if we grant all the promotions and the COLA, which I agree, they're necessary, because that's what everybody's saying is their number one priority. By the time you add all those up together, it's a lot of money. And again, it's not that it's not necessary. It's when we get to those additional operational expenses, are there places, you know, we always pick. Last year it was Veridesk. Sometimes it's water. Truthfully, to the public, we're talking, those are $1,000. It's nothing. So anyway. I just wanted to make that statement and see what you guys, if you have anything when you go through and rank or resubmit to something, I want you to, bear that in mind, that that's something that we have to consider. It's not to say that, it's not important for you to have a new conference room or a new office or new desks and new chairs. But if I have to make the choice between new chairs and taking care of the people so that we don't lose the service that we have and take care of the employees so that they can afford to live, that's an easy choice for me, so.
I'm gonna be banned from this process, aren't I? All these injects here. Also, some of these promotions are based on licensure. So, for example, our environmental health scientists, if they start off as an environmental health technician, they have 6 months then to pass that exam, and once they do, then the next step is to promote them to the environmental health one, which is definitely important, so that they can then do inspections without the backup of a supervisory or
Sure.
inspector that can then sign off on what they're doing. So it's rewarding them for that hard work and gaining the licensure that is a part of the job. And I'm sure there are other positions too within the county that are based on, to meet the minimum requirements. Licensure might be, or voluntary certifications and things like that. So, sorry, one last inject, and I'll sit down. Last you've heard of me. Thanks.
And I just remind you, please, from my perspective, why we have this meeting today is because your feedback is invaluable to us. It's really hard, especially when you step outside of your portfolio, to really understand what the boots on the ground need. And to go through and say, well, that $200, it's $200, but that $200 might be exactly the safety shoes that these people need to be safe and do their job effectively. So please, that's why this meeting is here today, so we can have an understanding, and hopefully the various departments can have an understanding of what happens in other departments, of why these requests are important. So don't hesitate to come up, and at this point, what I would like is come up and share some of your thoughts. What is your top priorities? What do you see from other departments? Share your thoughts on where this budget's at and where it needs to go.
Richard Nance, Drug and Alcohol. Since it's sharing time, and we do that a lot in therapy, I've been sitting and listening to all the departments come and talk about their additional requests, and I keep thinking the population growth in this county is just ridiculous how high it is. The number of new 5-story tech buildings is on the I-15 corridor is ridiculous how high the growth is. There was a comment made before, that the Public Works Department is losing people hand over fist to the construction business. We are all losing people hand over fist to the private sector. In the last 2.5 years, I've had 50% turnover in my clinical positions, and I know that's true in the Sheriff's Department too. We've got to be able to cope with the growth in the county. And what I hear people asking for is two things. One is cope with the growth. Two is give us the tools to be able to do things more efficiently and effectively. And so, if the public are listening to this, we're not asking for the moon. We're asking for just the right size budget for the tools and equipment and staff that we need to serve the public. And even with some of these efficiencies that we're asking for, that actually helps us do more with less still, even as we're trying to cope with the growth. So I hope you'll take that into consideration. I've lost another 2 staff members, 2 clinicians and an administrative staff member in the last month. And I don't see an end to that. It's just so competitive in the marketplace, and there may be some legislation proposed that would help increase the staffing that we use and the Children's Justice Center uses, and even the health department, but it's just really, really hard to continue to do our jobs. So I feel much better now, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and to echo while Jeff's walking up, Richard's comments on growth, just so the public knows, the new growth does help our budget. it helps to a tune of about $1.5 to $2 million a year in tax revenue. So it doesn't keep up at this current pace. It's been my experience that part of our tax rate, and it's a good problem to have because it's what makes us Utah County. We have a lot of green belt, which means we have a lot of farmland and farmers and agricultural that we need to continue to project. But they get a discounted rate. Some of those would argue it's still not high enough. That's a different debate. But because of that, if we want to continue to keep that which we have, and I argue we do, then we need to continue to look at revenue, which is how I get there. So anyway.
Jeff Human, County Attorney. I don't want to belabor the things that I stated when we did the tentative budget, but I just want to point out a couple things which are really reflective of what Richard has said, and well, both Richards, the growth and the increased workload to our departments. As you know, there's not really a standard for attorneys' offices, prosecution offices to say, this is how many cases you should have per prosecutor. So the way we did that is we analyzed the other 5 large counties in the state, looked at their caseload, and of course, a lot of this is driven by the internal pressure on our attorneys, which I'm very aware of day to day. But to tell you I need it is hard without data, so I got the best data that I could find. And as you'll recall, last year we talked about a 3-year plan to try to help the prosecutor's side of the attorney's office. Year 1, we implemented basically a small portion of that, 2 prosecutors, with a third that was really for Provo City's caseload that was dumped on us. Well, of those 2 prosecutors, our caseload in the last year has increased to absorb one of those prosecutors already. So effectively, we're kind of 1 prosecutor ahead of where we were a year ago. So what we're asking for is primarily more attorneys and staff to continue to be able to handle the caseload. Now, Mr. Means has indicated the increase in capital cases, and I don't think all the homicides that are potentially capital will end up as capital. In fact, I know they won't. But it just reflects the caseload increases and the crime changes in Utah County. We spoke a month ago about the number of homicides we had. We had 15 or 14, I think, a couple years ago, and then we got it down to 7 or 8 pending homicides. But we're back up to 16, and we don't see an end in sight. It just seems like they continue to come at a regular rate, which of course not only affects us, but it affects the sheriff's office and the public defenders. So that's the bulk of our request, is to retain the people that we have, because we've invested a lot of time and money training them and giving them proper experience. But it's also, we've got to get our prosecutors to a manageable caseload. And my department also has a unique change this coming year, that we'll have a new county attorney. And as you note in my requests, we know that he intends to bring in a chief deputy, so we're asking for funds to pay for that. Now, I talked about adding new attorneys to my office. The problem is we have no space. We've chopped up everything that we can. We don't think that there's a realistic way to get another office into our area. So we need to lease space out on the market in order to add more bodies. Also, our criminal division conference room, we don't fit in there anymore. We have increased the number, we've asked the supervisors to do more work in their team meetings, so we don't have too much of a problem, but nonetheless, we still do group training, and we do 1 group staff meeting per week, and we need space to handle that, so there's a small amount to expand. It basically just moves a wall forward about 6 feet, so that's in there. But again, mostly for us, we need boots on the ground, bodies in court that can handle the increased caseload. And I'll just ask you to maybe review again the presentation I presented about a month ago, or whenever we had our meeting. Is that a month?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other last pitch? All right, we have this scheduled to last for quite a while. So we're at 10:30. I'm going to, I like collaboration when we make decisions. Would you like to start ranking them as a large group? Would you like to take this home, back to your offices, mull over the list and get the list back to my office by later today or this time tomorrow, at which point we could collaborate the list and come up with a final list for the two of us. Which do you feel would be most productive? Would you like to have that time to mull through it on your own, or do you feel you need to ask some questions to the larger group as you go through that ranking process? And again, this is,
The lists are only come back to the two of you? You just said the two of us.
oh, I'm sorry.
I was like, I'd like a list.
Yeah, you'll get, I meant this list will come back. When I said the two of us, I was referring to me and Spring.
Oh.
Let me clarify that. Me and Spring, at which point we can collaborate them into one list
Okay.
that has the overall ranking to be shared with the three of us. Does that make sense?
Yes. I was
I'll
like,
clarify
I'm
that. Richard?
And others.
And others. So I want you to look at, so on the thing where it says committee rank, for example, even though my department would be the commission office, I would actually put number 1, and this would be items 62 through 83 on the sheriff's department, with the understanding that lines 63 through 72 are crossed out because we've already paid for those, recognizing that that's actually one ask for the court. So I would put that as number 1 for me. And then over in the committee rank, I would come back and I would say, you know, number 2 is line 208 from Public Works for the Sheep Creek match, because that's a road and a commitment that I know we've made, and so that's gonna be checked off. Numbers 3 and 4 are gonna be like the health school nurses, the grant-funded positions, things that I know we're committed to doing. And so I would compile that and break that down through there, and then we would be able to collaborate the lists to come up with what you guys are giving to us as saying, look, we see these as our top priorities as a group, and then we can go through and determine if we agree with that or not, and then determine to which level we feel comfortable funding. Does that kind of make sense?
I would recommend one
Suggestions
thing on the
open.
public works. I'd combine those lines into the additional operational like everybody else so that we're evaluating. We can always go deep with the commission and talk about specifics because if it's like last year, some of it was, oh, they asked for 200,000, but we only want to give them 50% because we found those things. The only other ask on that, on the list, if I were all of you, what I would like to see you all add is COLA as one line item, knowing that line, because I'd like to know where and what you think, because again, the money's only the money, right? There's only so much of it to go around.
Since you want us to rank these, I guess from 1 to 300 or 350, I guess, I don't know, is that?
But I think they also should be broken into A and C and general fund, because I think that's.
Well, then if that's the case, can I make a recommendation that somebody put together a new list that now has all of the number 1s, 2s, 3s, combine the items? Otherwise, we're all going off of different notes and who did what.
Yeah, I'm
and-
sure Spring has this saved, right? So we can make those changes. and
So
get
if
it out
somebody
to 'em.
could then create that list, so we're all working off the same
Yeah.
information, that would, I think, be better for all
Get
of
that out
us.
to you this afternoon.
Okay.
Maybe another, from last year's experience, if you would put your name on it, there was a lot of times there was questions where you thought, I don't have any clue what that means or that marks. As easy as it looks, there sometimes is a question. And so if we can come back and say, what did you mean by this or that? Because it seems there's cross outs and everything else.
Can I make one other recommendation, and that is,
Absolutely.
I have no business ranking the general fund. Doesn't do anything for me, I don't have any input. So my recommendation would be to split out into the various funding sources and let the people that understand those dynamics to be able to vote on that, and let those of us in the ANC fund to rank those. You're gonna get a better input from me based on that than you would just me trying to rank the overall general fund. So,
And-
just a
and-
couple of suggestions.
Great suggestions, and follow up to that, I think there's definitely, we will break these into the funding. And I would push back just a little on the second part, Kim. I actually want your opinion on the general fund. It's not that it's not necessarily that that's what we'll end up doing, but I think everyone's perspective in this room is valuable, because I view us as a team working together to try and make the county better. And even though you're working from a different fund, you're seeing things from your point of view. And when I understand how you're looking and seeing things, to me, it helps me make a more informed decision. Whether or not I agree with what you saw, for me personally, I find it helpful. But we could certainly, compile this together and shrink it, break it out into the different funds so that it was easier to do. And if you're completely objective and say, I don't want to rank that because it's general and not my business, I would leave that to you. You'd certainly be welcome to do it. But I know for me, the reason I like this process is because it helps me make a more informed decision, because it gives greater perspective from everyone who's trying to direct the county.
And I would also like to see you not look at the dollar figure, look at the value and the service, because that's the important thing to me. Because I will tell you right now, and again, for the 4 public people that will be watching this, that aren't employees, there's not one person in this room more passionate about what they do, not that you guys aren't, than Gary Ratcliffe, okay? He is more passionate about those stupid file folders than I'll ever be. But they are as important to him as the judicial branches of the sheriff's office. And he would tell you more because of what he's storing. He's storing property records and things like that. That doesn't mean the $1 million ask, I can't remember the total, versus 2,000. I'd like to see you rank them on their merit and see how those all work, right? All together. Don't try and fit a number. That's what we'll do. I'd like to see you evaluate them and say, yeah, after hearing that, yeah, what the attorney's saying, yeah, that's important. Or no, whatever, however you'd like to do it.
So my question is, being new to this, is at the sheriff's office, we ranked our top 25 items, and you have a copy of that. But for some of these other departments, the big ones especially, like Public Works, I look at theirs and even Jeff's, I don't know what some of that stuff even means. And I look at ours, and maybe we should have done a better job of explaining it. Like Lexipol. Lexipol doesn't mean anything to anyone else except for us. We know that's a policy and procedure program, and our policy and procedures are so outdated that one day it's pay now or pay later on policy and procedure with the sheriff's office.
So,
but they may not understand what that is. The mail scanner for $10,000 maintenance. That's one we're stuck with.
Right.
And if we
And that
don't
should
use
be
it,
in
it's a
that
boat
different
anchor down there. So it's yearly maintenance, but the rest of the group may not understand what some of our needs are, just like I may not understand what theirs are. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Part of why we have that meeting is so you have that chance to make the pitch.
Okay.
Explain to everyone here why this is critical.
Well, and I guess maybe I was a little confused because I didn't want to go through our entire list. People would pass out and die in here. So when we stood up, I thought you wanted only our number 1, not anything else down the list.
That's why I've asked for, if you've got anything else, make a pitch to everyone else on this list. If you need to do like the health department did, that's why we scheduled this till 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Tell us,
So
you might not understand what this
So,
is.
yeah,
Let me
for
explain
us,
what it
maybe
is.
things that people won't understand, is the $115,000 for the medical funding for the Corrections Bureau. That's something we're stuck with. That's
Okay,
not.
perfect.
We have no choice on that one, just like the district court. And the Lexipol issue that I talked about, our policy and procedures are so outdated, probably clear back from the 70s. They need to be updated with current law, and, current practice.
Which number is that?
6. Oh, 5.
I'm
On
just
his
going,
list.
I'm going by
sorry,
my
I'm on his
priority
list.
list that I gave you, so I haven't matched those up to the big list that.
Hey,
that's
my
out.
question for you though, your number 2 on your list, the transportation ban. I thought, didn't we just do a transfer for that?
We're trying. It's not been all approved yet, but we're trying to get that done out of monies from this year.
Okay.
So I can't stand here and tell you that it's for sure.
I thought I signed that.
No,
That was a different vehicle.
it must have been. This one's for the juvenile, because we've got to transfer juveniles back and forth now, so. Again, with the $350,000 for overtime in the jail, it's kind of, we're stuck with that. We don't have any choice. We have to put people in seats down there. kind of all there is to it. We talked about the mail scanner. Yeah, it's $10,000 a year, and I think that's something that the sheriff and I have inherited, and I don't think even Chief Deputy Higley knew about that.
Right.
That was done way before us, and I don't think they knew that there was a $10,000 a year maintenance fee. But if we don't use that, then it's a boat anchor. It's just
So the
sitting
only,
down there.
the only one on your list that I'm an absolute no on, just because, and it's, again, for me, with you guys, it seems it always comes back to Harley. I was promised some documentation that we had, because I'm a yes on Harleys if we can get the pricing that we've talked about on the lease
And
program.
I think we were, for some reason that was delayed. Do we have that now, don't we?
Okay.
The new lease
Because
numbers.
that was a significant change in
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, it was.
You know, talking about vehicles, have you turned the vehicles, list of vehicles into Public Works yet in the way of who has them? And I think, because we're still
position.
looking at that, waiting for that to come.
Yeah,
You have?
we're
Okay.
working on that.
Yeah, we
Okay.
need that list.
So you need a list of every vehicle
Who it's assigned to.
and who it's
job
assigned
title.
to.
Yeah,
Okay.
By position, that way
yeah.
Okay,
it matches with staffing plan in the future.
okay. Mike has that? Okay, yeah, I thought we had that, because we worked on that a couple of
How
weeks ago.
close are we on that, Richard? What about the others that have vehicles?
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Well, you
investigators
have them. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're really close.
Gonna say
I'm
investigators,
thinking it's
fire.
done already, but,
community development.
Okay. I
That's
know we
about
were
it,
just kinda
other
waiting
than
for that.
them.
okay.
I have vehicles, right? No, he's got yours. When you can do it on one hand, they got it.
The other thing that on our list that it may not say that on the main one is the RISE program, the clinical director. That can be paid for out of inmate funds. That's not something that's pulled out of the budget. And we can use that to pay for that $64,000. And I don't know on the main one that everyone else has, if it says that or not. What's that? No, those are through the inmates, through the phones and through
They're used, they're,
different fees the inmates have to pay, but it's very restrictive on what we can use those funds for.
so, maybe this is a character judgment for me. Your list, I'm going off of your list.
Okay,
I guess it kind of offends me to see number 11, not number 2 or 1.
that's kind of, and I understand.
And that's been the hard part for you guys is when I was your portfolio commissioner and getting to know your budget. That's the hard part, because when we're talking loss of life or protection of life,
I agree, but I don't know how to answer that because we're forced with district court. To me, that's not even a want. That's just, to me, we
but
probably
that's why I
should just
say,
take
so
that
in
off
that
the
case,
list.
so in other words, for me, you're 1, 4, and 6, right? 1, 4, and 6, or you're 1, 2, 3. And to me, they shouldn't even be on here for character judgment. We just have, you're right, we have to. It's
Stuck
kind of
with
like some of these others, right?
Right.
But then at that point, so if that's 1, 2, and 3, then number 4 from, that's what it's hard. Is it more important to have policies or more important to have working equipment? See, and that,
I know. I mean, and what they're talking about is the SWAT team, our SWAT team vests are expiring this year. And they need to be replaced. And that's a lot of money.
right,
to
and
replace
that was
our
something that
guys'
we talked
vests,
about potentially buying this year out of money, and that's something
Yeah.
that, rather than maybe buying a transportation van, I would like to see us maybe look at buying those this year, because if I remember right, in our budget, they expired December 31st. Now, we know that literally but I would never want to send somebody out.
Technically, will they last? Will they take a shot?
Maybe.
January 1st? Yeah, they will. But they're expired. So,
Which when you say Lexi Poll is a policymaker that we're either gonna pay the piper now or then, which unfortunately, that's what the previous sheriff kept saying, and on some of those things, we have paid the piper.
we have,
Because we didn't.
yeah.
That's one of those things that if somebody took a shot and we had expired equipment, holy cow.
Yeah, it would be
You'd think
bad.
tax increase.
It would be bad.
And that's why I say, to me, that's something that I'd like to see you guys try and identify $55,000 this year. Like, to me, those things aren't optional. It's kind of like bullets, guns, and uniforms, right? Cars.
Right.
To
And
me,
we can
it's-
certainly take a look at that. I mean, we'll scrub things if we have to. It is vital, and I guess putting that down at number 11, when there's probably number 1, 4, 6, and some of those others that are musts, it does push it up higher up the list. Does it push it higher than number 7 and 8? You know, number 7, the in-car radios, if you can't communicate, you got a problem in an incident. If you can't communicate, you know, there's nothing worse. Imagine everybody in the county, all these divisions have their phones cut off, no, their cell phones don't work. In a communication in an emergency incident, it's destroyed if you can't take care of that. So I agree with you, and we'll do what we can. We'll go back and do our homework and see if we can pull whatever's left this year to start on those. So,
Just, like I say, just because of a timing issue, this doesn't go into effect till January 1.
yeah, that's right.
Which means by the time you really order those and get them, now we're looking at probably March.
Or April or May, probably, realistically.
And
So
that's
we'll be-
why I think some of these things need to be started on now. And when we opened the budget, that would have been a great time to say, hey,
Our guys will be rolling with expired vests from
Yes.
January till when we get the new ones.
yeah.
That's,
So, anyway.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any other thoughts, questions?
Bryce Armstrong, Community Development. Richard covered ours quite well. I just wanted to touch base on a couple of our priorities. As Commissioner Graves mentioned, we broke out all of our operational expenses. We'll put those together as one. And, but there's a couple of our top priorities I just want to give some information on. And other departments may be in the same boat here. We've talked about, well, our first one is our what's deemed, this is CD1 under Public Works, Career Ladder Promotion. Again, this is a need of advanced planning duties. We've got a planner one whose duties are starting to creep into that. We have that need. We've got a great candidate, and so that's why that is our priority. I don't think we're unique in this, but we talked about trying to keep up with growth. Our department went through some pretty significant cuts in 2012. We lost 40% of our planning staff, and so we're really trying to get back. Trying to balance to get back to that staffing status and also absorb some of the growth that's been happening. And so that's
County's only
reflected.
grown by 100,000 since then.
Yeah, I mean, every measurable we have, you know, I look at our permits, our zoning requests, you know, when we were at that full 5 planners, now we're down, we got cut to 3, so there's your 40%. You know, if you take that workload at 100%, our workload is up 140% or up 40%. So it's 140% of that workload, and we've been working with, we got 1 planner back in 2014, and so our other ask is, one of our asks a little further down, our biggest ask is our new planner. And so our top priorities, our 1 through 5, are somewhat related to, well, at least 1 through 3, are somewhat related to staffing issues. We have a time-limited position that we're just trying to get up to fully funded to kind of help absorb the questions at the counter and the public engagement that's increased, which I think is great. Also, our contracted service, number 3, we're anticipating, we have a subdivision that we went through a lot of planning work to get entitled in the Alpine area. Doesn't look like, that was anticipated that was going to perhaps be annexed. That's not happening, and we're issuing permits. There's potential, like, quickly. We've issued 3 or 4 in that subdivision the last few months. We've exceeded our revenue projections for the year. There's 50 lots there that are sitting there that potentially we could get permits in. So that's just trying to absorb that additional workload for inspections to kind of help offset that need. So I just wanted to kind of take this opportunity, not regret coming up here and take a swing at it. So
I want to make sure and ask you a couple of questions on it. When we're talking about the planning and development, we're talking about unincorporated Utah County, right?
yes.
So when we talk about numbers and growth in the county overall, the difference between 2012 and 2018 in unincorporated Utah County can't be more than 1,000, right?
Oh, the population?
Population.
Yes, I think we've actually, the census projections I've seen actually shows us probably down 1,000 in unincorporated.
Right.
But, we still get permits and workloads and, I haven't touched on rezones. So, but yes, I think population has actually decreased a little bit.
And also.
Because of our policies.
And, not Greenbelt, the other one, ag protection.
Yes. Yes, and we have a whole new renewals process that's just recently started, which wasn't anticipated, so.
But we streamline that for a lot more efficiency.
What's that?
We streamline that for a lot more efficiency.
Yes, yes, that's a load that hadn't existed previously. It's less potentially than what it could have been, for sure.
But it's still up now because of the
Well, it
renewals.
didn't exist before,
Right.
correct.
I would just request, you can sit, you and Richard, if you can hurry and combine, and I say hurry when we're out of this, combine into your additional operational expenses. That way you can get it to spring immediately, so she can then put everything back together. So, because.
Because everyone's gonna get a new list.
Yes. So the sooner you can do that, that way spring can put it together and match it with her other.
So we're perfectly clear on that. What I would request from you, here this morning, early afternoon, if you haven't already, combine those additional operating expenses into one line. And then if you could please make a note, where the funding source is for this ask, if it's general, if it's B road, whatever it is, so that we don't have to look, she doesn't have to, I should say we, but it'll really be spring, doesn't have to go and backlog and look all of that up. So if you could just send her a basic email saying, X, Y, and Z are funded from the general fund, so that we can compile the new list that we would then send out to everyone. Does that make sense?
If you know it's a capital expense, add that too.
Yeah, if it's a capital expense,
And building improvement,
make that
things
note.
like that.
If it's
Yes.
grant funded, make that note.
Another thing we want to do, if we look at all these lines, we already did this, but so there are things that we can just say, all right, we can do without this. Go ahead.
Eliminate them now and submit them back to spring.
I would really, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a number of them that we've already stricken off, we just take them
Yeah,
off.
like, the scanner replacements from the health department, if the sheriff, if you could maybe just combine, for everyone's sake, the justice court or the court into what it is, might make it simpler. Does that make sense?
And for me, Daleen, if you could, since you're the financial wizard down there, see if there is $55,000, because otherwise, I think we need to go through a process where we open up the budget, because those to me are not optional type of things. And if policy falls under that, then we ought to look at that for this year, if we really truly can't find money.
Yes.
Yeah. Like the fact that judges have to travel because the legislature makes us pay for it.
Or add that, the contract with the roads, Richard, and, HR, the, what's it called? Cobra.
Aileen, don't we still have $500,000 of restricted? Okay. I mean, yeah.
Yes, you want us to look at using our 1,100 account facilities this year?
Absolutely. If there's something, let's whittle the list down. If there's some things that you feel are strong needs, but you can pay for it this year, I know for myself, I'd say, do it. The money's, you have that money there.
I'd like to
and-
keep the 1,100 account and, bucket for bucket. So if it's for benefits and employees, we should look at benefits or employees, promotions, whatever the case may be. Try to keep them same likeness.
Well, I don't disagree with you. But I think it's important then, since this is a public meeting, to state, when we talk about turning money back into the county, into our fund, we're only talking the 1,100 budgets for the most part. Everybody, and I say mostly, we mostly exhaust all of the other funds. And the reason we turn back money, just so the public's aware, is somebody quits because of low wages, and we can't fill it for 2.5 months. And so that's how the benefits in 1,100 get to be extra money. It's not that we're actually over budgeting. So.
Additional questions, thoughts? Everyone has a solid understanding of where we would like to go. You're smiling, I'm guessing that means yes.
Thank you all.
No, Richard's saying no, so if there's a no.
Richard's always saying no.
Okay, so again, if you can get Spring your updated list, combining the things that need combining with the notes of where it's funded from, and if there's an existing contract, and if it's mandated upon us. Those would be the three key things, I would say.
And the change in ranking that some of them.
Yep, the change in ranking, some of them have. I would say those would be the four key things that we would need from you in that email. And the quicker you get it to us, the quicker we can rearrange the list, send it out, and then you can get it back to us, and we'll keep working through the process of going, okay, where do we find the ways to do it?
Well, we'd like you to get all the changes to Spring within ASAP, so
Right.
she can put
By
it together.
By this afternoon, we'll try and have that out. Well, I'd like it within a day or so after we send out the new list.
Yeah.
I would say a day, but by the time we send out the new list, if you could take a day and have it back to us. And we need your,
ranking everyone else.
Yep.
it'll be a complete rank. So, like I said, I mean, if it's, and this is, I'm just pulling an item off here. If 26 on the attorney's line for glass tops on the desk, you know, everyone in this room said, hey, we have to have that. That's a number one. That would be your number
Would it
one.
be easier if everybody, especially the bigger departments, just put like we did, like a top 25 list, and then just leave everything else off?
Well, yes and no. I maybe would attach that so Spring can send that, but we need it in the Excel spreadsheet form so that everybody is working off the same list. That's too frustrating for everybody to work from different
It needs
lists.
to be the same list. Does that make sense?
When you turn them in, please put your name in. I'm just trying to help Spring. From last year, it was confusing.
Yeah, so put your name on it when you turn in the actual ranking.
Yeah.
So in other words, we want these by Halloween.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing a lot of promotions there,
Mhm.
everybody's, so when you're ranking them, how do you rank someone else's promotions above another?
That's
Well,
a-
I think that's for you to
question.
determine,
That's for you to
because
decide.
that's what the public has to decide, right? Like, part of the public needs to decide is the health department and the substance abuse, is the service that they do more consequential than what Gary Ratcliffe does in securing your property rights? Right? I understand what you're saying, but that's the dilemma we're faced with. Or is it public safety? Or is it prosecution of the offenders of public safety?
It seemed like to me, like some of them said, well, if they get the knowledge, they really are entitled to a promotion. We kind of need to know that so that we can rank those.
Put it in the notes.
Right? That's why we talked about it today. So if there's something on your list that you feel this group needs to know, now's your chance to say it.
It would be helpful if we see that you have to fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's supposed to be in your
That's supposed to be on
email.
your email.
Yeah.
Under contract.
On your email to, right,
Yes.
on your email to Spring, when you resend this in, consolidate what you can, drop what you can. We need to know where it's going to be funded from.
If it's grant,
If
contract.
it's grant funded, if there is an existing contract, if it is state mandated, or if it's required in some
Capital expense,
capital expense.
ANC,
noted.
or general fund.
And we will make that note on the new list we send out.
I was gonna suggest that you take it off the list if you're gonna fund it.
But we
if it's
may,
required.
whatever, but we need that back from you guys so that we can then send you all out the same working list.
So they could list those promotions as, because like here it's just listed as a total lump sum. Could they list ones, break them out so that the ones that they have to have?
No,
No.
because you're dealing with sensitive, I don't think some of that can be public.
I mean, the
Not the
dollar
names.
amount.
Oh,
Dollar amount, yeah.
yes,
Dollar amount, yes.
Just the dollar amount.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
kind of know where we're looking.
yes.
The dollar amount, yes.
So if you're giving a promotion to somebody who has to have
send that to me, this is what promotions are standard, and these are the ones that are.
So particularly like the health department's the first one that comes to mind with the environmental scientist. This promotion has the advancement is needed, right? So make that note on it, and on your new list, that note would be available for everyone to have. Yeah.
Robert Johnson with Substance Abuse. We do have one that we will submit with our list that was actually a payroll correction. It's not really a promotion, so it.
Yeah,
it's
you don't need
just-
to submit that. That's already taken care of. That adjustment should have been made, right?
It's not in the next year's budget. It's made now, but it's not in next
It's not
year's
next
budget.
year's.
Yeah, but it's not an option.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but it has to be.
But
has to be funded.
put it on there so we're aware of it. And again, that would receive the note, payroll adjustment mandatory, right? Okay, everyone, any additional questions? I want to make sure everyone understands. Now's the time to ask. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm going to say that you understand where we're headed. You all laugh, it makes me nervous.
Ready for a motion?
So, we can adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion will carry 3-0.